Joining me on this special broadcast is Ambassador Venu Rajamoni and, of course, Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow of the Observer Research Foundation. Ambassador, your appreciation of Prime Minister's visit, we are told this is more a multilateral visit, not much expectations on the bilateral leg of it. While the Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping interact for about 40 minutes, do we expect something from that interaction, or that's just exchanging pleasantries with the head of state of the home, host country?
The visit of the Prime Minister was preceded by State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to India, when we saw some very substantive announcements on how we are going to progress on the border front, both in terms of de-escalation, demarcation, and having further discussions at different levels. It would be interesting to see whether the Prime Minister and President Xi discusses that and whether there is any announcement with regard to that after the bilateral meeting. That truly is the most crucial item on the agenda issue to be discussed, particularly considering the clashes in Galwan and the fairly long period of frozen relations after that, or bad relations after that. So it is difficult at this stage to say what will come out. Only the two governments know, and they have been in close discussions with each other. But I would say that the Indian side would certainly hope to take the discussions further forward from whatever was discussed during Wang Yi's visit. And there will surely be some announcement, but let us not expect earth-shaking changes or earth-shaking announcements. The relationship has been bad. There are fundamental issues which are not easy to resolve. There is a trust deficit. Yes, agreed. Because of the actions of the United States, the atmosphere has become a little more congenial for India and China to come together. But we should not jump to conclusions. We should wait and see what progress is made. It will be incremental progress. It will be small steps. Essentially, first, we need to bring the relationship back to normalcy. At the same time, we need to see how our border agenda can be moved forward. At the same time, we need to see what is the international scenario.
Let's take this step by step. Let's take this step by step, Ambassador. You mentioned bilateral relations, and then, of course, how a third party, which is, our relations with the United States and Chinese relations with the United States, impacts this relationship. I'll come to that in just a moment. Sushant Sareen, when you talk about bilaterally India-China relationship, one is disengagement has happened after the Kazan meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Demarcation of border, should there be forward movement there? Would that be seen as a big step if the border is actually marked on borders? Some bit of ambiguity in the relationship will go, or do we see this more as we do take one step forward sometimes, but then ultimately end up taking two steps back? We still haven't seen de-escalation, let alone de-induction.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer that this is going to be the real test case on how we manage the border issue. Are we going to move towards a settlement? Are we moving towards a management of the problem, which we've tried to do in the past as well? I think from Mr. Modi's point of view, or the Modi government's point of view, they tried to push the envelope by asking for the interpretation on detailed maps of the line of control. The Chinese were not willing to do it. Like I said, there have been occasions between India and China when one side has proposed something and the other side has not decided to rise up to the occasion. The Chinese did it, we did not reciprocate. We did it, the Chinese have not reciprocated. Like I said earlier, this is a point in time where perhaps an opportunity has once again emerged. Will we rise up to the occasion? Now, whether it is demarcation, of course, it's going to be a step forward to what it was in the past, right? Let's not keep talking about this trust factor. I think it's a very overrated virtue in international relations. What matters is interest. Right now, the interests of both India and China are converging. Can we therefore rise up to the occasion? We keep talking about the Chinese helping the Pakistanis 3 months back. The Americans have held Pakistanis for 30 years. We did not let that intervene in our attempts to rebuild our relationship with the Americans. So why are we so stuck up that we are not going to make a big issue of what the Chinese have done, but we are not making a big issue of what the Americans have done, what Donald Trump has done, the kind of vicious language that his cronies have been using, people of his staff have been using. Is this diplomatic language? Is this diplomatic behavior?
Okay.
Are we there? So, the point is that we are making a big deal out of what the Chinese have done with the Pakistanis. The Americans have done the same. I don't think that should become the deal breaker.
Oh, absolutely.
We should push the envelope and see where we can go with it.
In fact,
I'm not saying everything will work out in a jiffy. It's not. It will take time, but at least let's be open about it. Let's try and do it.
Okay. In fact, Americans giving F-16s to Pakistan in the past and then upgrading those F-16s has been a major bone of contention between India and Pakistan, as has Chinese giving them not just the J-10Cs but also the PL-15s, long-range air-to-air missiles and their entire air defense system post Balakot airstrikes. But Ambassador, if I could come back to you on the, on the point that Sushant Sareen raised, that you were raising in the past about a very crucial time in the relationship between the two countries, impacted more because of the actions of a third party, which is the United States of America. Will China and India use this as an opportunity to come closer, or in your appreciation, would China see this as an opportunity that America and India are not the best of friends? This perhaps may be a time where they would want to extract more out of India, considering they may think we are vulnerable, or they've seen how we've stood up to the Americans and may look at it as an attempt to bring us onto the, on a more even keel in global equation. How do you see this pan out?
I would say that we should not jump to long-term conclusions based on short-term recent events. Whether it is the US, whether it's China, both are extremely important for India. With both, we need to stand firm when it comes to our interests. We need to articulate our interests clearly, and wherever our interests are affected, they appear to be set back because of the actions of the other country, we must have the strength to say no and stand firm, stand on our own feet. At the same time, we need to engage with both. We do not gain anything by making enemies of. And ultimately, President Trump is going to be in office for only one term as of now. And his policies may not continue forever. Even during his term, we have seen how many times he flip-flops. And the Indian government is still engaged in discussion with the United States. So the Indian effort would be to stabilize the relationship with the US, even while conceding no ground on issues extremely important to us. Similarly, with China, there are issues extremely important to us. Part of it is the Pakistan issue, which you mentioned. I don't think we can just equate China and the US and US support to Pakistan in that regard, because at least the most recent reports indicate a fair degree of integration between the Chinese militaries and the Pakistani militaries, and a continuous flow of intelligence to Pakistan while hostilities were taking place. Certainly, if there is an opportunity, this is an issue Prime Minister Modi should raise. And he should try and get the Chinese to not just pull back, but to put pressure on Pakistan to wind up the terror machine within their country and to stop creating instability in the region by constant terrorist attacks targeting India. Ultimately, China is fairly clear. While Pakistan is a close ally it could not abandon, China's long-term interest lies in a good relationship with India, which is the much bigger country, a bigger player on the international stage, and a strong economic partner. India and China collaborating in the economic field is of benefit to both, and we all know how much economics dictates Chinese policy. So I would say that for India, whether it is China, whether it is the US, the policy approach clearly is stand your ground on vital issues, yet try and make progress wherever you can. Let us not make enemies of them. Let's try and build bridges. Let's try and build friendship. But at the same time, let us also be prepared for the worst. With regard to China, it will be on the defense front, on the security front, if ever our relationship degenerates into a conflict or into tensions, we should be able to deter the Chinese and stand our ground. Similarly, with the Americans, when it comes to vital issues of economic interest to India, whether it is purchase of oil, whether it is protecting our agriculture and dairy sector, we must stand firm. Yet, we have everything that commends a good relationship with the US.
Interesting you should say that, and I'll get Sushant Sareen to weigh in on this as we take this conversation forward, but we're getting more reactions. You know, when we caught up with some of the Indian diaspora here in Beijing, who've come from different parts of China, whether it's students who are studying here or those who are working here, they seem to seek better cooperation. They say people to people, the Chinese people also want much better cooperation and coordination between the two countries. Easier said than done, but I want to listen in. I want you to listen in to some of the excitement that we witnessed just a short while back as Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived here at the Wanda Hotel in Tianjin.
My name is Harry, and I'm very proud that we see Modi ji, and then we can get a blessing from Modi ji. Thank you. I'm very excited to see Modi ji. When I shake hands with him, and I also touch his feet, and he also give me blessing. Yeah, I'm same with my brother.
I'm living in Xiamen, Fujian, and I'm here like in China for 23 years now, all total, yeah. So this is my whole family here. So we are so excited to see Modi ji, and he given the blessing to everyone. That's what's important, yeah. So I'm really thanks a lot for organizing everything, you know. And
of course, I was like blackout when he saw him. I don't know, I've been waiting him for a long time. So as soon as he
It was very good, interacting with the Prime Minister.
What did you say to him?
No, we just said that we've been waiting for you for quite a long because, obviously China is very big and people travel across. A lot of people have come in. There was excitement all around. And you know how popular our Prime Minister is and the kind of work that he's doing for the country. Looking forward, it was his visit after 7 years and very excited. He's very popular in China.
Is so excited, and I think we do our best. I think Prime Minister he like our music, classical music. It's so exciting and honor. Thank you, thankful.
So whether it's the Sarod or the Santoor or Bharatnatyam, Chinese artists, Chinese nationals learning to play Indian classical instruments or Indian classical dance, Bharatnatyam, Kuchipudi, Odissi, we saw all of it here. We heard, Vande Mataram also being played here. But I want to bring in Sushant Sareen. Beyond the optics, Sushant Sareen, while people to people we hear the resumption of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra or the direct flights between India and China, how do you take this relationship forward if that disengagement does not lead to either de-escalation or de-induction ultimately, or the borders remain tense? Or is there merit in the Chinese saying, let a future generation deal with the borders, keep the borders calm, but move forward economically?
No, I don't think you can. I don't necessarily buy what the Chinese argument is. Look, it's not as though that has not been tried. In fact, after the normalization with China took place, that was exactly what we were trying to do. We were trying to manage this issue. We were trying to come up with protocols and various agreements on how the border management is going to take place, how we are not going to do anything aggressive on the borders. But what does it take to change that whole thing? All that it took is that you sent in, you were doing an exercise and then you tried to encroach further into India. And that is not the first time it happened in 2020. It has happened in the past as well. So it's a better thing to have. And I think the Chinese also have this saying that tall fences make for good neighbors. So let's get the fence in place, right? Let's decide what is our part and what's theirs. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be easy, but I think that will lead to a lot of other problems getting sorted out. It will lead to a much greater amount of interaction between the two countries than if this problem keeps niggling, because these disputes can actually blow up in everybody's face, and we've seen that in the past, right? So I don't necessarily buy that argument that, look, you just need to manage it, leave it for the future generations. In the future, everybody is dead anyways, right? So let's tackle it as soon as we can. That's my view. The second thing is, I don't disagree with what the ambassador is saying. Yes, ideally we would like very good relations with all countries and benefit from good relations with all countries. But I suspect we are reaching a point in time where it's going to be you have to make certain choices now. Uh, Not that it wasn't there during the Cold War era, but I think you still had some room for maneuver at that time. Today, you, partly because of your economy is much more integrated with the West, your ability or your vulnerability is that much greater. And now we are seeing that the American administration is actually leaning upon the Europeans to ramp up sanctions on India. Okay. And you don't know,
Yes,
ambassador,
and that
if
would
is
indicate that would indicate
no, so Gaurav, the ambassador is presuming that we
that
have
would
three and a half.
indicate that there could be troubled times ahead. Give me a moment, Sushant Sareen. Give me a moment. Give me a moment. I have Shweta Singh, my colleague, who's also joining us from Tianjin. And Shweta has been covering this for Aaj Tak very extensively. Shweta, excitement when it comes to people ties. You were recently at the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra. You visited Tibet, but officially, Shweta, what are expectations from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Shanghai for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization at a time when borders remain frozen and yet there's cold peace there?
I think, Gaurav, even the most optimistic person would not think too much of this particular meeting. But whenever we are talking about one meeting between these two leaders, it is definitely a step forward. And as you rightly said, I was here for Kailash Mansarovar. We reached China. The first city that we went to was Chengdu. Chengdu, we were taken to see the pandas there. And the Chinese side made an all-out effort to actually exercise all its soft power when it came to journalists. Definitely when the journalists come from India, they'll take everything with a pinch of salt, but they made all efforts and full marks for the efforts because from there we were flown to Lhasa in Tibet, and basically we traveled through the heart of Tibet till Kailash Mansarovar and to the Divine Darshan. But even if we talk about the efforts of the Chinese side for the devotees, it was definitely something they wanted to show to the people of India that they want a change. They want to take it forward. But then, Gaurav, whenever we talk about the two countries, we definitely think of Sardar Patel as well, who had cautioned then Prime Minister Nehru about his assessment of the situation. If things have changed, we would like to see that things have changed, but there is a part of your heart which does not want to believe.
Okay, there's a part of your heart because that part of the heart has actually seen our soldiers bleed in Galwan, or we've seen the Chinese creeping forward in various locations. There used to be a no man's land, and now you were virtually eyeball to eyeball. And Ambassador, that's the situation we're talking about. There's a situation. America breathing down India's neck on tariffs or so-called sanctions. You have China, the situation that we saw at the LAC. We saw India's situation with Pakistan during Op Sindoor. And in this situation, we are engaging with China. Now, what are we expecting out of this re-engagement with China? How do we, use this? Or how are we using this to mitigate the challenges that come from the American sanctions on India or the additional tariffs on India, sir?
Well, I think the situation emerging from the additional tariffs on India is something which we have to resolve with the Americans. I don't see our relationship with China as a direct factor into it, nor will whatever we discuss or decide with China play a big role in changing American policy. It is through our dialogue with us, our discussions, our negotiations, that we'll have to try and get the Americans to change their position. As far as China is concerned, as I had mentioned earlier, we must only expect slow incremental progress, first towards normalization. We must try and take the relationship back to the pre-Galwan days. And that's not easy because in Galwan, we saw a complete collapse of all the confidence building measures on the border we had agreed upon through formal agreements, and both sides had reiterated support for. Now, let me explain some factors. There is the border settlement. And border settlement is going to involve a give and take of territory. Today, China claims all of Arunachal Pradesh as part of its territory. India claims all of Aksai as part of its territory. It is not going to be easy to do this give and take. And there has to be a building of opinion within India. The opposition has to be on board. The media has to be on board. So these are all the reasons why previously when a package deal was proposed, it did not succeed and it collapsed. So as an interim measure, in order to prevent incidents like Galwan happening, was the two steps which India and China had agreed upon initially. One is confidence building measures and management on the border. Nobody sees it as a final step nor something which is postponed into the future, but it is an interim step whereby in the absence of clashes and hostilities, the atmosphere becomes more conducive for an eventual settlement. The second most important pillar of whatever has happened till now was what was called the clarification of the line of actual control. Now, what is the clarification of the line of actual control? It is not border settlement, but just both sides agreeing, this is where I stand, this is where you stand. And beyond this point, I will not go, you will not come. And if that is done, once again, we can make a major step forward in reducing hostilities. Unfortunately, the Chinese see this as a ploy by India to make permanent this line of actual control. And as far as India is concerned, this is the necessary first step before a border settlement.
Give me a moment. Suyesha, my colleague, joins us for now explaining where those tensions at the border right now are and what is, how this presents us an opportunity to take this relationship forward. Suyesha Sawant with details. Suyesha, take it away.
Oh yes, absolutely, Gaurav. And I'd also like to tell our viewers how Sushant Sareen was talking about the revival of BRICS a short while ago. Now, why is it so important for Russia, India and China, and why the timing of it comes together? Because Russia is desperate for allies amid the Ukraine war. China, on the other hand, is seeking economic opportunity, and India seeks flexibility amid tariff blows. So like we have been saying, that the timing is such that it suits the interests of Russia, China and India if this grouping really happens and grows. But where is the thin line and what could really be an obstacle? Yes, the trust factor when it comes to India and China, especially after the Galwan clash in 2020, where our soldiers had taken the hit, and of course we had caused more damage on the other side. But facts still remain that despite the fact that it was discussed that confidence building measures would really take that on both sides, that did not happen. And of course, rare earth curbs from China that threaten India's EV sector could certainly be the other thought. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi all set to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping during his first visit to China in 7 years. The talks come at a time of global economic turmoil and Trump tariff row. But to understand what's at stake, we must look back. From Wuhan to Mahabalipuram, from Galwan to BRICS, the Modi-Xi story that has swung between bonhomie and breakdown. Can Tianjin mark a reset is the big question.
Two Asian giants meet again. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping will hold talks in Tianjin on August 31st. This is Prime Minister Modi's first visit to China since the Galwan clash of 2020, which pushed bilateral ties to their lowest in decades. But this is not the first time the two leaders have sought to reset relations. In 2019, Xi Jinping traveled to the historic coastal town of Mamallapuram for the second India-China informal summit. Images of Modi and Xi visiting ancient monuments send strong optics of civilizational bonding. Just a year earlier, the two leaders had held their first informal summit in Wuhan. The Wuhan Consensus was built as a reset in ties, stressing that differences must not turn into disputes amid Doklam standoff tensions. Modi's first major visit to China came in 2015. The chemistry was on display. Modi became the first world leader to be received by Xi in his hometown Xi'an. Then came the Galwan clash in 2020, breaking the fragile trust. For 2 years, Modi and Xi had no substantive engagement. A brief handshake at the G20 summit in Bali in 2022 marked Prime Minister Modi's first public contact with Xi Jinping since Galwan. A year later in Johannesburg, another brief conversation on the sidelines of BRICS signaled the need for continued dialogue. Their last meeting came in October 2024 at the BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia. That meet helped push forward disengagement at friction point in Ladakh.
It's my great pleasure to meet you in Kazan.
From Mamallapuram's optics to Galwan's rupture, the Modi-Xi story swings between smiles and standoffs. All eyes now on Tianjin. Can this reset really hold? Bureau Report, India Today.
Remember, the West is watching very, very carefully and rather uncomfortably. But why is it that the SCO poses a challenge to US dominance? Share in global GDP based on PPP, where SCO members constitute 34.2%, that is of the United States, 14.8% share that comes to the others. Now, the global population, as far as SCO members are concerned, 42.4% is where the United States stand, and 4.3% is the rest. SCO members that include China, India, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Belarus, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Now, I'd like to also take this question to our guest back, Sushant Sareen, who continues to stay with us on the broadcast. Your view, and I believe you want to make a point there, all right. Your view on what you expect as far as this power play is concerned, because the US certainly watching this grouping very closely.
Yeah. So look, it could play out, it could play out in unpredictable ways as well. One way of looking at it is that, look, there's a constant balance of power act which is under play. The fact that we were looking at a quad kind of an arrangement was balance of power. The fact that the Chinese look at Pakistan is to balance India. So there is always a balance of power which is at play. The question is that if the American, and given the capriciousness in Washington right now, and the way these guys react, they're hardly called rational actors anymore. The fact that they see India, China and Russia get together, even if informally, for some kind of confabulations, how will that play out in DC? Will that mean that they back off from putting pressure on us, or will the crazies around Trump provoke him into saying that virtually declare war on India? You are already treating India as enemy number one in many ways. You declare war on India, so you put pressure on the Europeans to sanction India. You do whatever else you can do to show these damn Indians that they're getting too big for their boots. You can't put that past the MAGA crowd, right? And the one point of my disagreement with Ambassador Moni is that, we are thinking that Trump is here for 3.5 years. But the forces that Trump has unleashed in the United States, we don't know whether they have actually managed to capture a large part of the American imagination. I can't rule it out. But how do we know that someone Trumpian will not succeed him 3.5 years from now. So how long are we going to continue to hedge our bets and say that, okay, fine, there will be a new change in the United States and we'll have, a certain amount of moderation coming back in US policy, and we will have the United States a more predictable kind of a player, which we had in the past, coming back in the future. We can't say that with any degree of certainty anymore. Not that we can say that about China, not that we can say that about any other country, right? So my own belief is that ideally we should become powerful enough ourselves that we don't have to look for balancing acts with other countries. But until that happens, we will have to do this kind of a diplomatic dance. We will have to, do this kind of balance of power kind of stuff which we are trying to do right now. We don't have too many options. That's my opinion, right? I don't represent the government. I don't make policy. But that's my opinion. That's the way I am looking at the strategic chessboard that India is facing right now. And yes, I think it's smart to try and reach out to the Chinese right now. But also let us not overestimate what will happen. Even if, supposing, for example, you get some kind of a border settlement, and I'm using the word settlement loosely, in the sense that you manage to settle something along the border and you bring down tensions. The problem is also going to be the economic question. It's all very well to talk about GDP in per capita income, purchasing power parity terms, but that's not how international economics works. The fact of the matter is India's economy is very, very deeply integrated with Western economies. Just look at the trade figures between India and the United States, India and Europe, and India and other alliance partners or other partners of the United States and Europe. And it's very clear that, it doesn't measure up to whatever SCO brings to the table, whatever BRICS brings to the table. It just doesn't measure up.
Right.
So this create problems for us. So let's not also get ahead of ourselves in thinking that, okay, fine, if it's not the United States and Europe, we can have a new marketplace between, China, India, Russia, and some of the other BRICS countries and other countries. It's easier said than done. It's far more complicated and far more torturous path to take. But nobody, I think, can predict with any degree of certainty how things are going to unfold in the coming few months.
Right. So, Sareen, the predictability factor that you talk about, and Ambassador Rajamani, I'd like your response to this, because who had expected Trump 2.0 will turn out like this? Rather, the insinuation at that time, I remember, was that, this will be very pro-India. And that has not really turned around. Also, the other factor we are talking about, the RICS revival, because the timing works, the motives work, but as far as the India-China thaw is concerned, can that reset really, be built in the time to come? All these factors at play. Your word.
I entirely agree with Sushant. What the need of the hour is diplomacy, a very nimble diplomacy, focused completely on our own interests. And to see how we advance these interests, I believe that Prime Minister Modi's bilateral meeting on top of the SCO is a step in that direction. The SCO itself, we heard the figures of GDP. Once again, where does the GDP come from? Predominantly it is China, and then followed by India. We heard population figures. Where does it come from? Once again, it is China and India. Therefore, it is extremely important that we reset India-China relations to a level of normalcy, which increases our maneuvering ground. But it is not going to replace India's relations with the US or India's relations with the West. Shanghai Cooperation Organization originated as an anti-terrorism organization, keeping in view the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda elements in Afghanistan and the instability caused by many forces in Central Asia, which were targeting Central Asian countries as well as China in its western Xinjiang province. Russia, of course, has had its own history of problems in Chechnya. So that is where the roots lie. But as far as India is concerned, the moment they admitted Pakistan into the grouping, the grouping became even more useless. Because, like right now, one question which nobody is discussing is Prime Minister Modi going to talk to Shehbaz Sharif, who's going to be there at the summit? Is there at least going to be a handshake? And that is going to be a difficult step for India to take after Operation Sindoor and after Pahalgam. That requires a lot more preparation. So Pakistan coming into SCO has reduced its importance for India. Similarly, BRICS is an imaginary concept which emerged from financial institutions in New York. They are not natural partners. Huge geography divides them. But even there, China is the biggest player. And following China, it is India. So once again, I reiterate, it is India-China relations which is the bedrock of all these organizations. If India-China relations are not good, their efficiency and their utility will be affected. If India and China can collaborate with each other, they can be strengthened and they will play a much larger role in the world as a counterbalance to many other things which is happening.